After showing this scarf as a sample during my Introduction to Tunisian Crochet episode, a viewer requested a walkthrough on how to make it, and I am perfectly happy to oblige because this fabric texture is gorgeous and it's one of my favorite things to make with Tunisian. It's plush filling, it has incredible drape, and it looks fantastic in pretty much any color. I'll also be showing you guys how to apply this knotted fringe to the edge to combat the roll that is inherent to most Tunisian fabrics, although you can skip it if a fringe of any sort just isn't your thing. Please be aware that my instructions throughout this video are going to assume that you have had a little bit of experience with Tunisian crochet already. If you haven't, please pause this video and go check out my Why You Should Try Tunisian Crochet and Tunisian Crochet Basics episodes first. Those videos contain information you really need to know to get off to a good start with this form of crochet and to get the most out of what I am showing you in this tutorial. Links to those videos are in the show description, along with links to the yarn and the tools that I'll be using today. All right, folks, let's do this. When I made this scarf a few years ago, I used a J or 6mm hook and a couple of balls of Caron Simply Soft that had been living in my stash. If you want this specific color, it's called Pagoda, and it took about 570 yards, which was most of 2 skeins. It's 8.5 inches wide, and it's about 6 inches long without the fringe. Today I'll be working with an H or 5mm hook and 3 skeins of Uptown DK in this pretty smoky plum color called Desert Rose. Uptown is made by Universal Yarn and is a super soft machine washable yarn with a very similar shine and drape to the Simply Soft, but it resists pilling a lot better. It comes in a huge range of colors, and it also comes in a worsted weight if you want the thicker, heavier fabric I made here. If you're not going to add fringe of any sort to your finished scarf, I encourage you to choose a wool or cotton or other natural fiber that will hold a heavy blocking, and possibly consider adding a border to it. But no matter what yarn you choose, please make sure you use a big enough hook. Tunisian is already a dense fabric, and this stitch is no exception. You want your scarf to drape well, and it won't do that if your hook is too small and you end up with stiff fabric. By the way, the specific stitch that we are doing today is called the Tunisian full stitch in most modern stitch guides, although I've run across multiple other names for it in older publications. Regardless of what you call it, if you want written instructions for this stitch, you can find them on page 38 of my favorite little basic Tunisian stitch guide here, or on page 26 of this much bigger Tunisian stitch dictionary, which I purchased a while back and will do a review on for you guys soon. As I go through this with you guys today, this is the hook I'm going to be using. This is actually a double-ended hook. This is a 10-inch 5mm or H hook, and I'm putting it inside my big green egg ergonomic handle here. My poor old grungy ergonomic handle, because I've used it for so many years. There we go. You can use just a straight needle in this size. I like doing this because it's more ergonomic. It's easier to hold on to. You can use just an interchangeable tip that goes on a cable, your choice, but you need a long enough hook or hook on a cable that you can put on somewhere in the vicinity of 32 to 36 or maybe even 38 stitches, depending upon the size of the yarn that you are working with and how many stitches across you want to do, what width the scarf you want to make. I also recommend, to help you get this particular stitch pattern down, the full stitch, I recommend you have some locking stitch markers available. These are my favorites. These are really soft and easy to open and close. And links to tools that I am using today, along with the yarns and so forth, will be in the show description. So don't feel like you have to try and write all that down. It's all down in those notes. Okay, let's get the ball band off of my Desert Rose here, this pretty smoky plum color, and get ready to do our starting chain. Your starting chain for this project can actually be done with a normal crochet hook, with a standard crochet hook, but I do recommend that you do your starting chain in a hook that is a size larger than what you were doing the rest of the project with. This helps you avoid the problem that can so often happen in pretty much any crochet project, and that is your starting chain being smaller and tighter and giving your starting edge of your project an almost like puckered look. this scarf that I did out of the Caron Simply Soft, being a worsted weight and being done on a larger hook, it came out, you know, fairly wide. I'm going to, there was 33 stitches in the starting chain on this. This being a little finer yarn, I'm going to do a few extra. I'm probably going to start with maybe 35, so I come up with something that's about this same width. So gently chain 33 if you're working with the worsted weight, and maybe 35 if you're working the DK weight like I am. $34 and $35. There's my starting chain. Okay, we're going to take this hook, set it aside, and load up on the 5mm that I'm doing the project with. Oop, knocking my camera. All right. I find that I like the starting corner of my project. If I don't go in the back of this first loop, I go in the back of this second one. Now you'll notice I'm not working in the front of the chain. I'm rolling to the back, and I'm anchoring in the third loop, or the back loop of the chain. And this is going to be our first row, a standard, just a typical forward pass, and the standard return pass. Okay, down to my last few forward pass loops to draw up. And the standard return pass we learned about in my Tunisian Basics episode. Again, if you have never done Tunisian before, please pause this video and go watch my other couple of Tunisian videos first, especially the basic Tunisian tutorial, because there's all sorts of things about Tunisian I am not going to be explaining in this video because I assume you already know them. Down to my last few yarn over and draw through twos of the standard return pass. And here we are. There's our starting edge, our nice, wide, elegant, full stitch Tunisian scarf. Now, you can dive straight into full stitch from this point. As you can see, I did here. And that's what that edge is going to look like if you don't do anything different. However, if you are especially not planning on doing fringe, or you don't like how that looked and you want something a little more finished looking, here's what it looks like when you do some rows of what's called Tunisian reverse stitch. You could also do Tunisian purl stitch and give yourself a bottom band to your fabric like this. Now you can still put fringe on this. It's not going to be quite as easy to do. If you're not a fringe person, then this might be the way you want to start out your project. Okay, ready to dive into our first row of full stitch. The spaces that we're going to be working into, Tunisian simple stitch, foundational stitch, passes underneath these front vertical bars. The reverse stitch I just mentioned, by the way, for starting, each of your loops, your forward pass loops, are drawn up underneath the back vertical bars instead, and it rolls this line forward. For Tunisian full stitch, we are working in these spaces here in between the vertical bars of each stitch. And there's 2 different rows that you do for this project. Row number 1 starts here in this space immediately. And then in the next space as well. Make sure you do not pass in between legs of stitches. Make sure you are passing through that square gap in between. I like to think of these, when you hold it open, I like to think of these as a sequence of boxes. We're passing through the middle of these boxes. Draw up 1 loop in each of those boxes across. I am approaching the end of the first full forward pass of the full stitch, and here's the first thing you need to watch out for in getting this pattern right. We have 2 spaces left in between vertical bars. This one and the last one here. Row number 1 of the 2-row sequence for full stitch, you go in this one, but you don't go in that one. You do your edge stitch under those 2 strands as normal. There's the last one of the row. Now we do our standard return pass. Yarn over the 2 all the way across. My last couple of yarn over and draw through 2s of the return pass done. And there we go. Doesn't look like much yet. Don't let that bother you. Now, time for round 2, row 2 of the full stitch sequence. For row 1, we started in the first empty space here, and we didn't go in the last empty available space here next to the edge. Row 2 is the exact opposite. Here's our first vertical bar that we drew up. We're going to go over here to the left of that. Here's our edge stitch. There's the next vertical bar in. We're going to go into this space to the left of that one. We're going to do that all the way across, just like the previous row. The end of the forward pass of row number 2, because at this end we skipped this first space and went in the second, at this end we're going to work in both of the available spaces left plus our edge. This row, beginning your return pass, can feel a little awkward because these last two, see how close they are together? The easiest way to skip accidentally working those 2 together and keeping them separate is to squeeze here at the base of the both of them, and that keeps them apart. So you can do your chain 1 and then start your return pass. Completing the last few stitches of my return pass. And there we are. There's our first standard row, our first row forward pass and return pass of row 1 of the full stitch pattern, and a forward pass and return pass of row 2 of the full stitch pattern. And this scarf consists of nothing but these 2 rows, rows 1 and 2 of the full stitch, alternated with each other over and over again until the scarf is as long as you want. Now, if you are having trouble identifying or remembering what's supposed to come next. Say you put this down, you come back to it a day or two later, you pick it up and go, oh goodness, where do I start the first stitch of this next row? Am I on row 1 or row 2? Well, of course, you can keep notes, but let's admit it, not everyone's good about that. So here's where the locking stitch markers come in handy. This edge, there's our edge stitch. We never have to worry about that. That's automatic. What we have to worry about is where are we doing stitches in relation. The way I like to think about it is it's like taking steps. Left, right, left, right, left, right. But if you're having a hard time seeing that, locking stitch markers to the rescue. We're going to mark this one that was done in the first space closest to the edge. And we're going to put this leg, or this marker, around the front vertical bar of the next one up. So there's the edge, and there's the next vertical bar. And as you can see, this one's to the right, this one's more to the left. That means the next one that we do is a row 1, and that starts with this space right here, closest to the edge. And then in there again, and in each of those open spaces between vertical bars all the way across the row. And you're going to start seeing the stitches line up in columns. These are lining up there. And the next row, when we do row 2 again, those stitches are going to line up with these in between that are being skipped. That's how we get this beautiful interlocking texture. So approaching the end of our row 1 again, because we started at this end, we started close into the edge, that first available space. That means we're going to not use our last available open square here, and we're only going to do our edge stitch. So go in this box, go in that box. We're going to skip this box, and we're only going to do our edge stitch. And our standard return pass. Completing the return pass for this row. Let's move our marker up right there to show that with that last row, we took our right step, left step, right step. Time for another left. Now I have found that when I'm going in the first space, I don't really have to worry about pulling slack out, and that might just be because of how I tension my yarn, but I do notice that when I am skipping the first opening and going in the second to start row 2, I do tend to end up with more slack in those edge stitches, and to avoid this edge being looser and sloppier than all of the others, we'll stop and do the pull the slack out of number 1, pull it out of number 2, pull it out of number 3, and then the rest of the row worked completely normal. Each of our boxes. And remember, Tunisian fabric does roll, so you're going to start seeing this. Don't let that bother you. You're not doing anything wrong. If it's excessive and you can't pull it open, it means your fabric is too tight. You need to loosen up. You need to draw up bigger loops, and you maybe need to consider going up to a bigger hook. As you can see, there they are, lining up with the vertical bars from a couple rows ago. Nothing but a sequence of right, left, right, left, right, left, all the way up our fabric. We're at the end of our row 2, and because our first one went one space in from the edge, not right next to the edge, at this end, we're going to make use of all of the boxes available at this end, plus our edge stitch. Second to last available space. Now, if you have trouble at this end, here's the way to beat that problem. Just remember that you are trying to create 90-degree angles. You're trying to create a corner here. When you take this and you pull it open, you can see there's your horizontal bars and here's the vertical bars. Another way that I like to think about this is that you are actually, going back to our box analogy, if this is a box, it has a top and a side. You don't want to go in the top, you want to go in the side. So you turn and look, and there's our line of upside down interlocking V's. Right there, right there, right there. You want to go in the pair at the side that lets you continue that line. So it's those two. When you pull like this, it makes it much easier for you to avoid accidentally going in the horizontal bars instead, which can be a lot easier to do, but it's going to give you an accidental decrease in your fabric, and it's going to give you this wonky angle of a decrease in the edge of your fabric. We put our last full stitch there, and then our edge stitch. Now remember, these two that are buddied up real tight, squeeze on them. Do your chain 1. Then it's much easier to begin your return pass. After the return pass for row 2 of the pattern is complete, we're going to leave the marker in our right step right here. We're going to mark the fact that that last row started with a left step, and with this one here and this one here, that means our next row starts in the space that lines up with this marked strand. And that's it. So pretty.
That's it. This scarf is the same 2 rows over and over again until it is as long as you want it to be. Now for those of you who want to add the knotted fringe to your piece, grab a ruler or a measuring tape, some scissors, and your leftover yarn, and let's tame those rolled edges with style.
This knotted fringe was something I ran across on the edge of a blanket in an old pattern book a long time ago, and I just thought it was so incredibly elegant. I decided to give it a try on this scarf when I made it, just to see how it turned out, and I've been in love with it ever since. The weight is fantastic, and it's so much cleaner than your typical loose fringes. Now, this being a thicker fabric, these clusters took up more strands than what I'm going to be doing on this one. And in this case, each of these started out with bundles of 10. And this fringe is about 6 inches in length from here to the edge. I want it to be about that same length on this. So surprisingly, in order for you to get that 6 inches, you need to cut yourself bundles of strands from your yarn. And yes, this fringe does use a lot of yardage, so make sure that you leave yourself plenty of working yarn to actually be able to do your fringe. But these strips are 24 inches long. We need to account for extra length because these are not only basically being effectively cut in half, but we have yardage that gets lost or inches that gets lost in these knots and joining points and down here as well. We also need length when we're done that we can trim down to be equal or close to equal lengths for that nice clean look when we're done applying this and done doing the knotting. Here are my bundles that I cut, and these are bundles of 8. Let me show you how to add these to the fabric. Now, here's a tail at the beginning of the project. One of the fun things about this technique is you can actually bury tails inside your tassel clusters. The direction that you insert the hook actually affects the look of this. It is far better to come from the underside than it is from up above in the fabric. And that is because we want this portion of our joining knot to be on the right side of the fabric. If you insert your hook from above, this is what would be showing on the outside. So come from underneath, take your bundle, put on the hook, and get some pressure on it. So you want to be able to drag the heads of all those loops through that fabric. Set the hook aside. We've got this big open loop that we can put some fingers in. We're going to grab all those tails, pull them through, and then we're going to gently pull down and tug gently, holding onto your fabric until everything is nice and smooth. If any of these strands are looser than you want them to be, you can pull on this and see which ones move down below, or you can just go through and give each of these little tails a tug until anything that is loose tightens up. There we go. There it was. Now our tail here, you grab a wool needle. Let's bury this end in this cluster. Here we go. No more end to weave in. Let me show you one more of these from the underside. Now you'll notice that I have this pinned to my work surface, and that's because normally, of course, you would be doing this after this isn't this short. You'd be doing this when you got 5-6 feet of fabric. I'm in a rush. I'm in a hurry. I want to show you guys what this looks like. Pulling that through. Pull through enough that you have a big enough loop that you can reach through with your fingers and do this. Don't worry if your strands aren't perfectly smooth, if they're a little wrinkly. Don't worry if your ends aren't perfectly even. A washing to relax those will help straighten those out, and we'll be trimming these at the end when they're done. I've attached all of my strand clusters. The next step is to go through and count and divide these out into equal halves. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. and 8. Or whatever half of the number of strands that you used turns out to be. Now I leave the edge bundles alone. Now that we have our bundles divided out, it's time to start knotting. Break them out gently, nice and smoothly. Put a finger across this point. Fold them up and away from you. Carry that tail to the front. Now reach through the loop that's around your fingers. Grab that whole bundle. Pull it down and through. And gently tug. Don't pull super tight. Not yet. We can gently manipulate that point. And if none of these are as tight and smooth in with the rest as you would like, you can go through and do the same thing we did before when we were attaching the bundles. You just give everything a gentle little tug to get it pulled down to the same tension so that our little knot there looks nice and smooth. Here we go. Let me show you one more of those. Take this half and this half from the neighboring bundle. Rake them out nice and smooth. Lay a finger across. Tails up and over and around. Get a couple of fingers in this loop. Tails around. And pull them through. Make sure you're not getting any tails from neighboring clusters involved in this process. And seat the knot. We've got this loose strand here. So let's go through and find its end and get it sewed down to match the rest. Of course, it'll probably be the last one that I try, right? That's how that always works out. Nope, it wasn't even that one. Ah, I didn't pull on that first one enough. Let's finish up the rest of these. There we are. Now, you can either trim these now, or if your yarn is really uneven, you can wait until after you've washed these and they're nice and smooth, and then you can trim them. I'm pretty confident in how they're going to look after they're washed, so we're going to go ahead and trim now. Drag these up here where you can see. Now, if one of your knots isn't quite where you want it, you can still work on positioning things to be a little more even. Snug this down there. Now everything's sitting at approximately the same angle. You can either freehand this, or you can lay a ruler across and use that as a marking and measuring line. I'm just going to do it haircut style. Trim and bangs. Trimming the ends of your hair. trimming bubble gum out of a kid's hair? How many of you have had that fun experience? There it is. Here's your knotted fringe.
I refuse to apologize if you are now officially addicted to this stitch. If you had fun following this tutorial today, please share it with other crocheters in your life who might enjoy it too, and I would love to see pictures of finished projects or projects in progress. Feel free to post those in the comments or send them to me via email or via Instagram. Thanks for watching I Heart Yarn today. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Make time to make things that make you happy, and I'll see you next time.